those days, there was a lot of hype on great musicians, and of course, his coming back to the Kenton band was not only important. Uh, I think that was when the Innovations band, which uh, Shelley always liked innovative music. He was into progressing, very
Right.
creative guy also. In fact, it used to be it was almost a thing about who was more musical, Max Roach or Shelley Mann. I think that was sort of stupid because I think they both were, and they both had different things going. They were both two different people with two different ideas, but always thinking of tomorrow. I mean, to coin a phrase, uh, always trying to make something happen that would be new.
Yeah.
And I preferred Shelley's playing in small groups later on, because he got away from big band playing.
Right.
And I thought he was a little. On some of the records he made with Kenton's band, he was a little heavy. That could be the recordings themselves, or the fact that the band was just
Yeah.
ponderous, and so when he made this remark about the playing with the band was like chopping wood, because it was one of the loudest bands in the world too, and he really had a. They took a picture of
Hawk
him.
away.
He joined back. He would rejoin the band, and they had a picture of Kenton standing over him while he was chopping wood. So,
At least they had a sense of humor about it.
oh
You know,
sure,
it wasn't like so serious they couldn't joke.
oh yeah, he had some, but he had a marvelous sense of humor. I mean, he was one of the silliest guys on the coast. Everybody loved. He always had new jokes, and he did things. He was very outgoing.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, he had a famous club, Shelley's
Well, that
Manhole.
started later on. The reason he did that is because he became such a busy studio musician
Right.
that and he had a group. He had his own group that worked a lot in L.A. But as things started to dwindle, I mean, clubs started folding, and like he couldn't take his group to the Lighthouse because they had their own band out there, and he had played there for a long time himself, as did Stan Levy, and I used to play out there as a substitute for all those guys. As a matter of fact, I never worked there steady, but and then there was like a few places around, but I mean, you had to drive for miles to get from one club to the other, and there was nothing in Los Angeles itself, in Hollywood, nothing. There was Jazz City. When Jazz City folded, a lot of other clubs folded too because they didn't realize what was going on. Shelley used to play at the upstairs at the Crescendo. I forget the name of the place upstairs. It was
Black
different.
Hawk?
No. Black
Oh,
Hawk
that
was
was
in
San
San
Francisco.
Francisco. And so one day Shelley decided I'm going to create my own place to play. So he he opened up a place called Shelley's Manhole right on Cahuenga Boulevard, and that became our hangout. I worked there quite often, and Shelley had his the group with Connie at that time, Connie Condoli and Richie Kamuka and Monty Budwig and Russ Freeman. So they got to work. They worked weekends mostly, because he brought in name groups from New York and all that. That became the club in town.
Yeah.
And what ruined that club was the famous Wally Hyder, engineer, opened up a big studio next door, recording studio. And when rock and roll got heavy, it started to be where you could hear all that noise coming through the walls.
Mm.
But you could also hear the jazz going through the walls the other way. So it got to be such a thing where I think Wally bought and owned the building. So he actually forced Shelley out of there.
That's not
A-
too cool.
and then Shelley found another place over on Wilshire Boulevard, which was a restaurant in the afternoon. It was owned by Oriental people. I don't know whether they were Chinese or Japanese. I forget what. But it wasn't a Chinese or Japanese restaurant in the afternoon. It was just a restaurant.
Right.
And at 8 o'clock in the evening, it became Shelley's Manhole. There was a bandstand and everything. I played there with Thad and I with our band coming back from Japan. As a matter of fact, we did a week there.
Yeah.
Very successful week too. It was packed, and it was a nice place. Everybody treated you great. Shelley was a wonderful host and all that, and I let him sit in with the band a couple times. and
So
which he really flipped over.
yeah.
And but the place was well run, everything was nice, but he was losing money with that club, and he couldn't figure out why. It turned out that because the place was packed all the time. I mean, the money was coming in, but
Right.
still the books were ending up
In the
on the
red.
losing end all the time. These people were padding. He was paying their liquor bills for their restaurant, all those expensive wines and things.
Yep.
He was paying it. He didn't know it. They were working it out so that they were charging him. It was coming off.
I
There was
understand.
some kind of a partnership set up there. I don't remember
The old
exactly.
BS with the books there.
He was so hurt by it that people would do that to him because he was honest with them that he just walked out and said that's it and closed the club. Just said that's it. And people can't be honest in business. And here they're trying to ruin him when he was trying to keep something alive and happening in Los Angeles because it was the only place in Los Angeles to go where you could hear the best. And when you couldn't hear the best, I mean, when he didn't bring somebody from out of town, from Blakey or Max or us or somebody like that into the club, you got to hear his group, which was the best around. I mean, in L.A. It was a very good band, and good food and good everything. Because they carried on the tradition of the restaurant later. So anyway, that's how that ended. But and it made it rough for him now. So he started traveling a little more after that, getting out and starting accepting jobs with festivals and things, and leaving L.A., which was good because you got to hear him a lot more. He started coming back and working with trios and quartets in New York.
Yeah.
So it was nice.
Could you tell us something about the kind of drum set that he was playing when he was with Kenton, and then the kind that we'll hear him on next when we hear the Shelly Manne and his men with Conti and them?
Shelley was a Gretsch drummer for years. In Kenton's band, he played regular Gretsch drums for a long time, but being his father and Billy Gladstone were such good friends, and Shelley studied with Billy Gladstone, and he became very close friends with Gladstone.
Insert. Please tell us who Billy Gladstone was.
Billy Gladstone was a featured percussion performer and great teacher and all that, and an inventor of some. I guess you'd call him an inventor. I mean, he made drums in conjunction with the Gretsch Company using the famous Gretsch shell, but he had some special designs for hardware and for drum tuning and what we call. A drummer knows what we call the strainer was a very special strainer. Like in fact, even today, like on my Pearl drum, you get what you call it's a Gladstone type of strainer. It's a throw off that comes off to the side and has very sensitive tuning. It's the best and it's smooth. But he also invented a drum. You could tune the drum from one side. It would tune both heads, but even, And it was a wonderful drum, very expensive at that time. And Shelley played Gladstone drums in Kenton's band.
Billy Gladstone, you were about to say, was
Oh
featured
yeah,
at
he was
Radio
featured
City?
at Radio City. Yeah, I didn't finish. Yeah, in fact, I went to see him many times, and I mean, I'll tell a story about Gladstone and me someday when we do a little more on maybe on myself, which we'll get around to probably at the very, very end of this whole thing. But and I can tell my association with
Yeah,
Gladstone.
I have to remember those stories because I'm very anxious to hear them.
But with Shelley, he loved Shelley Manne. I remember he made a special a black shell drum with all gold plated. One of his best drums, and gave it to Shelley. And Shelley loved it so much he never used it because he didn't want to pound it up and all. It was a concert snare drum, and so. And out in California, Shelley was heavily respected he was a star in L.A., a big star, and everybody wanted him. And to be honest, I was his only competition when I moved out there, coming off the Kenton band that I came off of. I sort of took over the big band work that he had been doing, and he fell out of that big band scene. Because I took it over. but it certainly didn't hurt his pocketbook because he was probably easily the most popular drummer out there, and he was doing a lot of movies because he could create. He could look up at a screen and do things with the drums that I couldn't do, and because he had that kind of thing. He saw things that he'd work. And they used to hire him just to make drum sounds.
Colors.
To color up, dramatic scenes and things like that. He did a lot of that, and it was very interesting. Once in a while, I went when I had nothing to do. I'd go and visit him on a set where he was doing studio, like picture calls or even television, and just sit there next to him and watch the way he, because we used to, in those earlier days we were working with film. I mean, you could see the stuff on the screen.
Right.
The conductor had to watch. Everybody had to watch. The drummers had to watch what's going on, and I'd be astounded at some of the things he'd come up with.
For someone who wants to see him, you can see Shelly Man in the Gene Krupa story. He plays Davy Tough.
Yeah, he plays Davy Tuffin. Well, now there's a case where his favorite drummer was Davy Tough.
And he was a student and of his, and he filmed them, right? I think he took a movie of Davy Tough.
You can hear Davy and Shelley's playing. That was his favorite, although he also liked Joe Jones and Sid Catlin. I know that.
Yeah.
But very much. But Davy was his. He was very close with Davy too.
What did Shelley say about Davy? Do you remember anything?
No, I don't remember. He just. But I know he talked a lot about him. But I mean, because they were good friends when Shelley was younger, of course.
Right.
And of course, Davy died young anyway. But I think he was a very big influence. Because Shelley also used a big Chinese cymbal. He did things. His cymbal setup was similar to Davy's, and except that he had a ride cymbal.
Right.
Because by that time, ride cymbals were coming in,
Right.
and but he had the big Chinese cymbal, a big one.
Yeah.
And he used to use it behind Vito Musso and all that,
Yeah.
And
Let me ask you a question. What if Shelly Man, let's say, was playing Chinese cymbals and ride cymbals, let's say, in the bands in those years? Was the actual ride cymbal beat different on the ride as opposed to the Chinese?
No.
The same beat?
No, but you had to know your Chinese cymbal.
Right.
I mean, if you didn't have a good Chinese cymbal, it was silly to even play on it. You had to know that cymbal because a Chinese cymbal is a hand. Most of the good ones are handmade.
Right.
And you have to know the sounds and know where to hit it because every inch changes. So you have to really find out where you want it and where it'll lay right. So you'll always be playing in the same spot.
Right.
But they also were brittle.
Right.
And it was Shelley's Chinese cymbal that eventually broke. I think somebody sat in and played it, and they broke the cymbal on him because they didn't know where to hit it, and they actually cracked it to a point where, he said it like almost fell in half, and of course that cymbal couldn't be replaced, and so he went to Zildjian at that time, and to see if they could create a Chinese cymbal, being they didn't make Chinese cymbals. I mean, this was a real Chinese cymbal. Could they create one, a Zildjian, that would be as good as what he had? So they decided, of course, to try. And they made about 4 or 5 cymbals that turned out real good, which one Shelley had, and he put rivets in it. And one went to Cozy Cole, got a hold of one, which ended up in Dizzy Gillespie's hands later on. And one ended up at Ellis Toland's drum shop in Philadelphia, and which Ellis told Dizzy about and said, if you ever need this, I'll save this for you. And one day when I had a not-so-good Chinese cymbal stolen from me, and I was already working with Dizzy by that time, Dizzy said, call Ellis Toland and tell him to give you the cymbal that he's been saving for me.
Oh, man.
Now, Dizzy didn't know how good that cymbal was at the time. He never even... But it was a brand new old cymbal that was created that Shelley was involved in. And in fact, if it hadn't been for Shelley, those cymbals wouldn't have happened. And this symbol was sent to me. It cost me $50.
Mhm.
I drilled holes in it, put the rivets in, and that became the Mel Lewis famous sound,
Yeah.
which is still going on. That symbol was stolen from me later on at off the bus up in Connecticut, along with a few other K Zildjian symbols, genuine Turkish made, which really broke my heart.
Yeah, sure.
But losing the Chinese symbol was what really killed me.
Yeah.
I called Zildjian, and I says, look. So anyway, I spoke to Armin Zildjian, and told him, I says, do you still know about? Do you remember that? He says, yes, as a matter, because he was a young guy then
Right.
too. That's when his father was still running everything.
Right.
They went into their files,
Yeah.
and they found the casting and the die and he found it. He says, I think we got it. So he says, I'm going to make up two symbols. They will be unfinished and heavy, and we're going to send them to you. And all we got to know from you is, are they the right shape? Because if they're the right shape, then we know we did it, because it's different from any symbol they ever made.
Right.
So sure enough, it was the right symbol.
Oh man.
And then what I had to do is take these two very heavy symbols now, because they're unfinished, and I put them in my trunk of my car, and I drove up to Boston, went to the factory, and they gave me their best lathe man, the guy that does the spinning
Right.
and takes care of, because the symbols had already been hammered. They just needed to be spun to get that where they look like a recording.
Mhm.
It's very important. That's the tuning of the symbol. And I sat up there for a whole day with these two symbols, and we created the symbols that I play today.
Oh my God.
Yeah, which have been around a long time now. The one I use at the Vanguard with the band is it's about 15 years old now or more, and the number 2 symbol that I put away as a spare, which I just started using, which is the one I use with your,
Right.
and it's a good symbol too. I'm just starting to use it because I don't want it to go to waste.
Right.
Because for a long time it was just a spare. I kept it put away, and I gave that symbol to Buddy Rich.
The
He
spare
had it,
one?
the spare, because he wanted one, but he didn't use it. And after he passed away, nobody knew where it was, and they found it. It was in his apartment in New York, hidden behind in a bag, and it was marked Mel symbol.
Really.
Yeah, and so it was returned to me, and then so I started using it. I says,
Yeah.
I'm going to use this symbol because they're just too good to let sit around.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm using both of them now, and so Shelley was responsible for this whole
That
thing.
whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why this
If
long
that guy
story.
hadn't sat in on his old
Yes,
symbol and
exactly.
cracked it, then there wouldn't have been this little family
Yeah.
of symbols.
And the funny bit is,
Yeah.
Zildjian tried to put these symbols out on their own, but they didn't have me. They had Shelley to tune the first one. They had me to tune the later ones, but they didn't have us anymore. They don't know the sound,
Right.
and they made this symbol. They called it a swish knocker. It was supposed to be called a Mel Lewis model symbol because everybody was calling and asking for a symbol
Right.
like Mel Lewis's anyway.
Right.
Young guys they didn't know about Shelley Mann,
Right.
and the one Shelley had disappeared. He didn't know what happened to his.
Hmm.
Because when I lost him, I called him. In fact, I asked him. I says, "Do you still have that Chinese symbol that you had made by Zildjian?" And he said, "Mel, I can't tell you where it is. I have no idea." As a matter of fact, because he
Strange.
he didn't, because he quit using it years before, and in fact, I never heard him using a Chinese symbol after he left Kenton's band.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, it just, I don't know. I don't even remember if I gave it to anybody or somebody just took it and I said, yeah, take it. Or I left it someplace. He said, I can't tell you, but I don't have it. So otherwise, I would have taken that symbol,
Two more questions. About sometimes when you see the Chinese symbols that have the wedge cut out of them,
Yeah.
what's that all about?
Whenever there's a
not being
wedge
drummer,
cut out
I
of,
don't know what that means.
Whenever there's a wedge cut out of any symbol, it's because the symbol was cracked.
Mm-hmm. But
And
you can still
have
play
to,
it?
yeah, but you have to remove the crack or it'll spread further.
Right.
So by cutting from the edge of the symbol to the point where the crack is, where it ends, like a V shape.
Like a pie, a piece
Yeah,
of pie.
a piece of pie. You can save the symbol that way. It'll deaden the symbol a little bit because as the sound travels around through those grooves I was talking
Right.
about, when it reaches that spot, it stops
Right.
and then continues.
Yeah.
So naturally, that because that's a dead spot. There's a hole there, you know.
Yeah.
And in many cases, it makes the cymbal even better. The cymbal will sound better than it did before.
Hmm.
In a lot of cases, and in some cases, it just dies and it's
Yeah.
no good. You know.
Other question about one of the basic elements of jazz drumming, of course, is every drummer's, and we're going to relate this at the end of it to Shelly Man because that's where we are in the development of the history of jazz drums. But this question really relates to everybody: is that ding ding da ding?
Yeah.
I mean that playing that ride cymbal beat is part of different drummers' signatures. And I'm wondering if you can talk about, like, since we just heard Max Roach, and now we're hearing Shelly, and of course. When we do get to you and Mel Lewis, what we're going to do is we're going to finish the history of jazz drums in a few months, however long it takes with these shows. And when we get to the drums, then we're going to, again, redo what we did back in '82, which is devote just a whole series of shows to you, where I have those tapes we made up many years ago of all your best things. Remember, I borrowed all those records and made tapes. So we have that. So we're going to get into great detail
we can
about
add some
that.
new ones by then.
Yeah, a lot of new
Yeah.
ones. But anyway, if you can tell me about the ding ding da ding, about the ride cymbal beat as it relates to Shelly and to Max and to yourself.
Like I said, Shelley spending all those years in the Kenton band. The Kenton band played. If you're a Kenton fan and you have records of his at home with Shelly Man on them, you will notice that the band plays with a la 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 style instead of la 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 da 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 da, which was more prevalent in like the Basie band and the Ellington band and Woody's band even. Played more a shuffle 12/8. The Kenton band played more of a straight 8 feel, and but not straight 8, but
Right.
more of an 8 feel. Stan liked straight tone and straight 8 is what he tried to get the band to play. Now that early band, like those things, they used vibrato yet in those
Right.
days, but Stan still wanted that 8 feel. Why I don't know, but that's what he liked, you know, and because he wanted his band to be different. He also was making it harder for the band to swing.
Yeah, impossible.
So in order to do that, Shelley had to straighten out his beat and open it wider and play more of what you would call like da 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 instead of da 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 da, you know, and as opposed to what Max was playing with the little shorter. A grace note in there, you know, the dotted 8/16th or whatever you want to call it, or the triplet feel. Max played with the shorter one. Shelley's had to open his up to fit the way the band had to play, and it's sort of after many years, it's sort of stayed that way, you know, because when you're doing it day in and day out, you get used to it, and it becomes, you know. And he even does it in a small group. You can hear it in his playing, where his it's a more of a bomb ba ba bomb ba ba bomb ba bomb da ga da ba ba ba, but it works. It
Right.
works fine, you know.
Yeah.
And because he developed everything else around that. Of course, we didn't even finish about the drums he played. I mean, he was a Gretsch drummer for
Right.
years and years, and he played the Gladstone drums. And then when he left the band and he settled out on the coast, he got some small drums. He always sort of used a 20-inch bass drum, and he used a 22 or a 24. Now those are let's see.
Yeah, this is one. In front of us, we have one of these Shelly Man and His Men at the Black Hawk records we're looking
That's the Leedy drum that he switched to later on, which was when he left Gretsch. He made a deal with what was actually the Slingerland Company, who had taken over Leedy drums and were making a Leedy drum, which was really a Slingerland drum with Leedy hardware. That's all it was, and the hoops were Slingerland hoops.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a combination of Slingerland and Leedy. It was and actually it was a lot of bull, because it was just some people like
Sleety.
Leedy, so you bought they could have called it Sleety. It was sleazy a little bit, a business venture. The Leedy didn't sell too well because they really weren't Leedy. Leedy was another drum company that really made a great drum in its day, you know. But Shelley played Gretsch for years and years and years, and he got a great sound on him. And why he left the company to go, but I don't know. I have no idea. I really don't know unless Slingerland came and offered and made him They needed somebody, and I think they just made him a great offer in some way. That might, I don't know if it involved money. I never asked him. because he certainly could have anything he wanted from Gretsch as far as drums were concerned. There was no
Sure.
question, because I know that he could, because I did, you know. And but he maintained the same sound even when he switched.
Did
still
he use
sound-
calfskin heads?
He used calfskin heads until, really up until Remo Belli. When Remo developed his plastic heads, we were his guinea pigs. All the drummers that lived on the coast. So we all got the very first plastic heads. We got the what do you call the first ones?
Prototype?
Yeah, the prototypes. We were trying them for him.
Right.
And the nights in Los Angeles were quite damp. The days were very dry and hot, you know. So you went nuts with your calf heads. And Shelley switched. He switched to plastic. And I just didn't. That's all. I just didn't like them, you know.
Yeah.
I used them on the bottoms because I found out that there was a good combination.
Cap on the top.
Calf on the top, plastic on the bottom, which is what I use today, except on my bass drums.
Right.
I use two calf heads, front and back, but because that's a better sound, you know. But you still got to tune them and all, you know. But I don't have much problem with the Vanguard, for instance, where the temperature is basically the same all the time.
Sure. And the
I
drums
mean,
are used to being there.
Yeah, and it's on the humid side. I like the deep sound you
Yeah.
get from a bass drum. To me, bass should be bass, and Shelley liked that too. He liked the deep
Yeah.
sound, but he did it with plastic. And but if I recall, he stayed with the calf on his bass drum,
Mhm.
on the batter side also. I think he stayed with calf on the bass drum, but on the other drums he switched.
Yeah.
Tom-toms and snare drum, you know. And also a lot of guys sat in on his drums. He used to let people sit
Yeah.
in. He changed his
changed.
ways, yeah. And out in L.A. and at the Manhole, he'd let guys sit in on his drums, and of course, you were safer with plastic heads.
Right. It's 6 minutes after the hour of 2 o'clock. You're listening to WKCR FM in New York, 89.9 on your FM dial, Tuesday afternoons out to lunch. My name is Lauren Schoenberg, and I'm here with Mel Lewis. And Mel Lewis is in the middle of a long series on the history of jazz drums. This is part 5, and today has been Max Roach, and we'll do Shelly Manne.
We're doing
And
Shelly, man.
yes, right. And when we come back 2 weeks from today, we'll get into Art Blakey and probably Tiny Khan on that show. So, and we have so many great things to come. So let's get to the music. This is Shelly Manne in his very popular, busy West Coast years. Shelly Manne and His Men, an early edition with Stu Williamson, trumpet, Charlie Mariano, alto, Russ Freeman, piano, Leroy Vinegar on the bass, and of course Shelly on the drums. This is Bud Powell's composition Un Poco Loco. We heard the original with Max Roach. Now we'll hear Shelly Manne, the great solo and effects, and we'll come back and talk with Mel Lewis about it.
Yeah, I think this is Shorty Rogers' arrangement. uh, Shelley's what he's doing, in case he put a tambourine on the big tom tom, the 14-inch on the floor,
Yeah.
right on the right to the right, and he played that whole first. So he played the same beat as Max did,
Right.
with only on brush with a brush on the top. The tambourine was setting with the head up. The head of the tambourine is up,
Right.
and he's playing and of course it's a calfskin head on the tambourine, so it gets that flattish sound. It works good with the brush, and he's playing on that. He plays butt up, on that part of it, and then answering with the other brush in the left hand, on a muffled snare drum and the other tom tom, the small tom tom, and he keeps it going that way through the whole first chorus, and then he switched, and he went to sticks,
Right.
and he played what you would call a standard, basically a standard jazz Latin beat on the cup of that. He had a nice ride cymbal there. That cymbal had a large cup on it.
Mhm.
It was a 20-inch cymbal, which also was stolen from him years later. It disappeared, and he was really drugged. It happened in Boston, as a matter of fact. That's funny. My cymbals got lost in Hartford, so New England is loaded with cymbal thieves. And his cymbals were stolen that cymbal was stolen. He was working at George Wean's club up there called the
Storyville.
Storyville, right? And with this group,
Mhm.
the group that he had now, that he had on this record that we just heard. So, but that was a marvelous cymbal, and had a lot of quality to it. And then the solo, he went back to brushes.
Yeah.
That's a brush solo all the way. And of course, you don't hear the big tom tom, you hear the tambourine, because the tambourine is still sitting there,
Right.
because there was no way he could take it off of there and then put it back in time for the out chorus,
Right.
which he had to go back to that rhythm again.
Yeah.
But that's a very good solo.
Oh, it's a masterpiece.
Yeah.
I like when he's doing that rhythmic figure, the ba da ba da ba da ba da, and then he goes ba 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 ba. It's like,
Oh yeah. No,
so yeah.
Shelley wasn't afraid either. Yeah, he was a fine soloist. I used to love to listen to his solos.
yeah.
In fact, he was a little influence on me too later on. I can think of a lot of things I've done that came out of him. Because he was so into dynamics. And I used to go naturally living in L.A. I heard him a lot, so he was quite an influence. I learned about dynamics from him, and he's the one that was on my first tour with Kenton. It's funny. On my first tour with Kenton, Shelley was there with Shorty's Giants. It was a great tour. It was Shelley, Shorty Rogers Giants, Art Tatum Trio, Charlie Ventura Quartet, with Mary Ann McCall singing, and I think Sonny Igo was the drummer on that one. So we had Shelley and Sonny Igo. Of course, Tatum didn't have drums, and me with the Kenton Band. And it was my first. I just joined Kenton's band. Shelley used to stand in the wings and watch me play. And one day after we were out there, this is how we really got friendly. He came to me and says, "Can I make a suggestion to you?" And I said, "Sure, of course." And he said, "Mel, I feel that you're emphasizing on the cymbal." He says, "Your cymbal beat is beautiful, but you're hitting too much 2 and 4 on the cymbal because your hi-hat's there. You don't need that. I think you should give it a little more 1 and 3 also." And he's the one that got me started on that.
Really?
And I went right at it, and it worked, and then he gave me a high sign from the wings that sounded great. And from then on, I developed, really developed the cymbal beat I have today from that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the same spread. I didn't change my grace note,
Right.
but I was hitting 2 and 4 a little more than was necessary.
Yeah.
And I started giving it more 1 and 3, which he does. You can hear that. in
Yeah.
his
Very
playing.
even.
Yeah, so you get 1, 2, 3, and 4,
Yeah.
which is really that's it.
Yeah. I've heard the 1, 2, 3, 4 talked about when Joe Jones would talk about the way the Count Basie's band got into the beat. It did. He said it was a combination of Benny Moten's band, which was a real 1 and 3 band, and the Blue Devils, which was nothing but a 2 and 4 band. So when they met in Basie's band, you got that nice even spread. It's 2:22. We're with Mel Lewis, the history of jazz drums. We're playing Shelly Manne. Let's hear something from the group Shelly Manne and His Men, the later group with Richie Kamuka on tenor and Joe Gordon on trumpet.
Mm-hmm.
Monty Budwig on bass. The pianist here is Victor Feldman,
That's right.
and Shelly Manne on the drums. And this is something called A Gem from Tiffany, written by Bill Holman. And this was their theme, and it has a great solo by Shelley. September 22nd, 1959.